Hello everyone, I'm Casper. Welcome to Testeroni, where we help you become test automation engineers one slice at a time. And after we've done the whole trilogy on sleeps, thread sleeps, hard-coded sleeps, however you want to call them, and I really recommend you go and give it a watch if you haven't already. We've talked about what thread sleeps are, why they are considered bad, and when they should be considered good, because they are situations like that also. But while finishing up the episode on playing the devil's advocate of thread sleeps, it also came to my mind, and you can see it live on the recording, that we should actually do a fourth part, which is what can we do if we don't want to use thread sleeps? Because it's one thing to understand that thread sleeps are like bad, quote unquote, and to understand that you shouldn't really use them or that they are frowned upon. That's one thing, but a completely different ballgame is understanding what can you do instead of them then, because if you don't have a replacement, then what's good in knowing that they are bad? And so today we're going to focus exactly on that, and we are going to do a quick one explaining the possible substitutes for your thread sleeps. And so let's jump to our whiteboard. So there are basically a couple of things you can do, and the first one, and it's such a huge one that I think I am going to use a bigger font for it, because it really is going to trample the other ones. So let's give it a bigger font, and it's weights. So weights are a huge topic in test automation. There's going to be plenty of videos about weights, how to structure them, how to design them, and all those stuff you're going to see. So, but the important thing is, in general, weights are commands that tell your script that it should, as the name implies, wait for something to happen before progressing. And they are going to be the main weapon that you are going to be using as a test automation engineer in order to make sure that the state of the application is such that it is ready for your assertions, for your tests, for whatever may come next. This is the most important thing. You need to have your battlefield ready before you start a battle, and so this is what weights are helpful for. And in the modern frameworks, basically all of them handle weights more or less automatically to some extent. It's not really something that you are going to need to develop on your own. You're going to develop the logic behind the weights, but the weights themselves, like Selenium does explicit weight, for example, where you can use expected conditions, which will tell the script that it should wait for something to be like interactable, clickable, or something like that before you can progress. Robot Framework has its keywords, which are already designed for that situation, like wait until element is visible, or wait until element is like interactable in some other way, wait until element is like present, or something like that. And the most modern, the cool kids frameworks like Cypress or Playwright, they do things called auto waiting. So they are waiting basically without the need for you to tell them explicitly. So they try their best, like for better or worse, but that's for another day. They try their best to actually do that for you, and to provide you with a mechanism that makes sure that the application is ready to be tested before they start running your tests against it. And they try to do that less explicitly than you need to do in frameworks like Robot Framework or Selenium. Like Selenium is something when you need to be the most explicit. But that's also for another day. Weights in general allow you to make sure in your code that something is ready for testing before it becomes ready. And that is basically the main way to combat the need for thread sleeps, because when you do a wait, you actually do what thread sleep was supposed to do in the first place. Because hard-coded sleeps, the whole philosophy behind them is that they are there to make sure that the application is ready to progress with testing. And if you have a wait, so if you have a command that basically tells your testing framework that it should wait for something to happen or something to pop up or something to be interactable and stuff like that, you are doing exactly that, just better, because you are not providing a specific time. You are not providing a specific wait for 5 seconds, even though To an untrained eye, it may seem like a sleep and a wait is something similar, because in one situation you just tell it to sleep for some time, and in another time you just tell it to wait for some time. No, they are not the same at all. A sleep does exactly that. It goes to sleep for that duration. You can think of it like something like a sleep mechanics in a game, for example. You just provided a time and your character goes to sleep for that time. You can't really do anything about it. Even if something is ready, even if the HP is full before they wake up, they will still wake up that time afterwards. And we go into way more detail about that in the first video on sleep, so I recommend you go back there and check it out. And in the case of waits, you are not waiting for a predefined time. Like, there is some maximum time, of course, you define a timeout, but you are not waiting for this time, you are waiting for something to happen. Of course, there are also more naive types of wait, like implicit wait in Selenium, which does, like, you can just provide it maximum time. But in general, in modern test automation, you want to use waits that not only wait for a maximum amount of time, but also check for some condition. That's the most important. And they stop waiting beforehand if the condition is ready before it times out. They have some polling time, so the interval at which they keep rechecking and stuff like that. So basically, they are what many people wish sleep was. That's basically the way you can think about waits. So waits are waiting for something to be ready for testing, and if it is ready earlier than the maximum timeout time that you have provided, they go into the testing during that time, rather than just waiting naively until the end of a stopwatch. So that's the waits, and this is the biggest killer of sleeps, and this is something you should try and implement instead of sleeps every time a sleep comes to your mind. If you think that something should be fixed with using a sleep in order to mitigate an issue of something not being ready for testing yet, you should always think about a counterexample of using waits, because if such a solution is available, then basically always it's going to be the better one. And I've also demonstrated that in the previous videos, where in the one against and in the one for threat sleeps, I also talk about such a situation. Like, I give one example of a situation where using a wait is way better, and another example when there isn't anything specific to wait for. And in such a situation, sure, go ahead, use a sleep. But if you can use a wait, then you should use a wait. And in such a situation, it is going to be more fluid and more dynamically adjusting to the circumstances and to the landscape of the application and the load that it is undertaking at a given moment. Number 2 is going to be event-based triggers. So this one depends heavily on the architecture and the mechanisms that are running both your application and your framework, and the extent to which you are doing the QA of stuff, and the extent of which the code base is structured in tandem or in unison. But in general, sometimes there are situations when you can't use just a wait, an explicitly defined wait, but still the application itself generates some kind of triggers or signals that you can listen to, that you can create a script that is listening to in order to actually find them. So in such a situation, it's better to just use a signal, because then you know the application just let you know that something has happened and it is ready, rather than just using naively a sleep and waiting for a specific time before progressing. This just allows your test to be more efficient, more reactive to stuff that is happening, rather than just waiting for a specific time. So like I said, this depends heavily, but like in an example in the backend, the API example that I gave during the previous video on sleeps, for example, that one could be something that could give you some kind of signal or something like that. Very often you can't really force another department to add something that gives signals to the application that something is ready, but sometimes they are just there, and then it's better and wiser to just use them and to save some time again, than just to use a sleep for a predefined amount of time. And number 3 is going to be conditional logic. maybe even let's do conditional logic / design to better illustrate what I mean. Because what I mean by conditional logic or design is that you should, in a situation where there is some race condition or there's some not really trivial order of operations happening, and so you come across problems where your application is not ready for testing when you want it to be. It may very well be that implementing a conditional logic or design is going to be a remedy for that. And what I mean by conditional logic or design is that you should always think about, if you don't have a specific element to, for example, wait for, maybe you have another element that you can wait for, because you know that when that one is ready, then your, like the one that you're targeting, your element is also going to be ready. So very often you may come across a situation where you can't explicitly wait, or it would be really tiresome to actually create like a selector for something that you are waiting for, or there isn't anything specific to wait for because it may take different forms and stuff like that. But you know that when this happens, something else also changes on the website, something that is more stable, something that is easier to locate, something that is easier to target. And in such a situation, rather than using a sleep to naively wait for the element or to just give it a maximum timeout, it may be good to actually understand. This is why understanding your application is so important. This is why exploratory testing is so important. This is why just knowing your product is important, because then you can just know that, all right, so this thing is hard to target and it is troublesome for some reason, or it is unstable for some reason. But I know that when this happens, something else also happens. Or when I know that if this weird form appears somewhere on the website, or this one element is added to the list, the dynamically create a list or something like that, that, for example, the counter goes up or the counter appears or something like that. I know that I can't really, let's say, pinpoint a specific form on this web page, but I know that as soon as the navigation bar, let's say, I don't know, that would be a weird design, but let's go with this example. When the navigation bar loads, I'm 100% certain that the form has already been loaded too, because of something you have learned from like the front-end team or the back-end team, or you have figured out for some reason, or because one is like from this microservice and the other one is from a different microservice, and you just know that when this happens, then the other thing will surely have happened by that time already. And so in such a situation, you can just wait for the other thing. If it is easier to grasp, if it is easier to target, if it is something that allows you to use more stable selectors or stuff like that, let's just go with that. Let's just use another thing. And this is why it's so important, once again, to know your application. Because very often you can mitigate both the issues of sleep, the technical issues, and the headache issues of finding a workaround for a sleep by just implementing a conditional logic or design. In such a situation, you just know fully well that, okay, I can wait for something else, but I know for certain that what I am actually waiting for is going to be ready by then too. So yes, of course, this list could go on. We could dive into more advanced techniques like, for example, asynchronous testing and stuff like that. But I think there's no point whatsoever. This is a channel for people who are going to get into test automation. And as such, what we have discussed here is going to cover 99% of situations you are going to come across your career as a whole. Let's be honest. 100% of scenarios you're going to come across when you're a beginner and when you are starting out, and still 99% of stuff you are going to come across later in your endeavors. So I don't think that's actually beneficial to just throw out this stuff and to just make your head spin with all the other techniques. Yes, they are there. That's why I'm mentioning them. You should know that they are also like asynchronous solutions also and stuff like that. But let's not get into that. Well, what we've talked about, and especially the weights, are going to be the most important thing. You should keep in mind all these things. especially the weights, but the conditional logic or design should always be something that you are wary of also, because that just shows your knowledge of the application, and that allows you to be more proficient in creating elegant solutions that are tailored for your project or organization. And so that's basically all you need to know about the possible replacements for sleeps. And I also believe that this is also all you need to know about sleeps whatsoever. Like, this is the finish of the 4-part mini-series on sleeps. I really recommend you go watch the ones that you haven't watched already, because I think it's a good overview to see a bird's eye view over both the pros, the cons, the definitions, but also the possible solutions if you want to have a replacement and to substitute the sleeps for something else. Then I believe this video here will provide you with some information about what exactly you can substitute it with. And with that, I thank you for sticking with me for the duration of this journey. I hope that it has been helpful. As always, I recommend you leave a comment, like and subscribe, and also to like our profile on Instagram and Facebook. I always welcome your comments, your issues, your questions. If you have some ideas or something you would want to bounce off of us, then I always invite you to do that. So once again, thank you very much for your attention, and as always, keep on rocking.